Good people, it's growth group time. So you know what that means, right? Is that we're digging into the scriptures, and I want to dig right in today because there is so much in Exodus chapters 3 and 4. Some of my favorite passages in all of the Bible, and indeed the reason probably why I named my son Moses is really found right here in these chapters. There's so much to dig into. These videos, of course, are meant to get you going as a primer in your discussion, in your study, but ultimately in your discussion. My hope is that you would use these videos as you lean into discussion with your growth groups. And of course, we want to give these things out to our teens as well as they gather for their teen growth groups even tonight. So let me get right into Exodus 3 and 4. Hopefully you've had the chance to read, to ask those three questions, like what does this say about God? What does this reveal about humanity, therefore me? And then what am I supposed to do as a result? As a reminder, don't use these videos as a substitution to your time with the Lord, but as a supplement to discussion. And then also, like as a reminder, really the mission of growth groups is pretty specific. It's not just to get together and hang out, catch up on life. That's fine and well. But ultimately, it is to pursue obedience to the Lord, hold one another accountable to that, encourage one another on the way. There's this old quote that we use in the formation of our church and in the maturation of our church, that ultimately your whole church is going to be judged on whether or not your disciples are any good at all. And we judge whether or not we're any good disciples based on our love for Jesus. And Jesus says, if you love me, you'll obey me. And so that's ultimately the heart behind obedience, not legalism, but obedience unto the Lord is an indicator of our love for him. All right, that's enough of that. Let's dig into Exodus 3 and 4. Here we go. I don't know about you, but such good stuff here. So let me break it down for you as what I saw as most important. What are these things, what are these passages revealing about our God? Well, one, God's plan of redemption is going to include, more often times than not, particularly with the story of the Exodus, God's plan of redemption, and therefore God's plan for you, is going to include ill-equipped and insecure people, including our man Moses. You see him bartering and trying to trade with what? I can't do this. I can't speak good. I can't lead. I can't do all these things in verses 8 and 10 and throughout 3 and 4. And God usually includes people that feel ill-equipped. The reason for that, he doesn't want professional leaders to do his thing. He wants people that are dependent on him. And I hope you know that you will never feel equipped enough to do what God wants you to do. He will oftentimes call people that are dependent, not self-sufficient. That is a mark of success in the world, not in the scriptures. And so we need to get that right. He will call ill-equipped, insecure people to do redemptive, massive things with his help. The other things that he will do, or that he reminds us of in verse, I think it's 12 or maybe 17. I can't read my handwriting. I think it's 12. God's greatest gift to his people is his presence. Not the promise of success, not the promise that everything's going to work out right. It's his presence. I will be with you. I don't know what that does for you, but it reorients my definition of success. It reorients what I truly need as I walk through life. I don't need anything. I need God's presence. I don't need the promise that it's going to work out. I need God's presence. And that is exactly what he tells us. Now, the problem is that we want success on our mission. And it's the third thing that I think these passages reveal about God, is that he often sends us on missions that will fail. Doesn't he say that in verse 19 and then in 19 of chapter 3, 21 of chapter 4? Pharaoh's not going to listen to you. His heart is going to be hardened against this call to go out to the wilderness. And yet I want you to go. Yet I want you to exercise faith in obedience to the one who says I am and go. And so will God's presence be enough for us? Even and especially if that mission is destined to be frustrating and to take longer than we'd hoped. Well, I hope so, because ultimately that's a lot of life. And so I think those are the things that this passage reveals about God in a big picture way. Well, what does it reveal about us? Well, first and foremost, we have this subtle progression that is revealed in these chapters of disobedience, or perhaps delayed obedience. And here's that subtle progression that you see in the scripture. The first thing that we do when we're trying to delay obedience or get off the hook of obedience, we doubt ourselves. Moses does this in verse 11. Well, I can't speak all that well, Lord. I mean, who am I to go over here? And then he doubts the mission. Like, I don't really know if this is going to work. They're not going to believe me. And so I'm going to just kind of doubt the mission. So you doubt yourself. You doubt the mission, perhaps the call of God. Then you doubt God himself in chapter 4, verse 1. And then you realize like God doesn't relent from his call for you. And that's in verse 12 of chapter 4. So you've got doubting yourself in chapter 3, verse 11. You doubt the mission in verse 13. You doubt God himself in chapter 4, verse 1. And then you doubt, and then you realize God's not going to let up. And you have that choice, right? In God's call for you to do difficult things. You have the choice to go, you know what, I'm not going to do it. You can be disobedient. But if we're going to obey, if we're going to be good stewards of God's truth, the bad news is, and the good news for our soul, is that he doesn't relent. He doesn't give up on us, and he still calls you to do the thing that you don't want to do. And this can become cyclical if we're not careful, but we just doubt ourselves. We're going to doubt the mission. I mean, it's not worth it anyways. And did God really even say these things? It can become cyclical until his anger burns against you, kindles, it says. He will rebuke you, but he will not relent. And so I think we have to understand, like, though we may doubt, God will not relent in his call for us to do hard things. And that really is the second thing. And the final thing that I think this reveals for me in this passage, we don't like to do hard things. We want comfort. We want security that this is going to work out. But you see it like in verse 13 of chapter 4. We just don't want to do hard things. And so Moses continues to say, like, I don't want to do this. Send somebody else. Can you just send somebody else to do this? Like, great idea. Awesome mission, Lord. But I don't want to do it. Oh, what great comfort we have in our friend Moses, because we oftentimes just probably if we were really, really candid and really honest with our prayers, I don't want to do that. I don't want to set up. I don't want to tear down. I don't want to care for toddlers. I don't want to carve out time to do hard things. You just send somebody else, and God will not relent. But he oftentimes will have an anger kindled against us until we relent to his unrelenting posture, that there is a greater good here that we need to pursue if we're going to follow him. Well, what must we do? First, we have to trust that what God calls us to do, he will equip us to do. Even if it means sending the community of God around us to help supplement our own weaknesses, like he does with Aaron and Moses. Could be that God acknowledges, you know what, you're right, you're not real good at speaking. But have you considered Aaron, your brother? He'll speak for you. Tell him everything you need to do, and he will help you along the way. We need to trust what God's plan is. He's going to equip us. We just need to walk in faith. Don't overcomplicate things when God calls us to do special missions or services to him. He's going to equip us along the way. We have to trust him to do that. And then secondly, you may be thinking, what in the world is going on with this whole episode in Zipporah? With circumcision and whatnot at the end of chapter 4. I too wonder what's going on, and scholars debate the meaning of what's going on there. But here's what I think is a big takeaway. No matter what you say is the meaning with the whole circumcision episode, what we do know, and what I would really make sure that we understand here, we cannot be instruments of God's mission while also sacrificing personal holiness. God's mission is not more important than your holiness. And so Moses' household is out of order. Either he or his son, we're not real clear in the text, is not circumcised. God intends to kill Moses or his son. And Zipporah circumcises their son, we think, and in so doing causes God's anger to relent, and off they go. And it just picks right back up, and he goes and gets on his mission. I mean, our personal holiness is more important than the mission. And so whatever God is calling you to go lead or do in our church, outside of our church, professionally, ministry-wise, you better not sacrifice your holiness for the sake of, or your own personal walk for the sake of someone else's. It's most important that we get with the Lord and create that intimacy. And so what are we supposed to do as a result of all that? Well, verse 31 of chapter 4 is they bowed down and worshiped. We need to be a people of deep worship, of God's pursuit of us, his cleansing of his people, and that our ultimately worship isn't just singing on a Sunday. It's setting him apart as ultimately worthy and worth whatever sacrifice he calls us to, and that we would worship him for choosing us to be a part. Man, there is no greater thing to be recruited into his family, recruited onto his mission, and to be used in these mighty ways. So I hope that you find a lot of comfort and a lot of humility in the fact that God has recruited us into his family and for his purposes. And who are we to say, well, I'm not equipped and I don't want to, and could you just go find someone else? Ultimately, we can say those things, but God's going to bring us into alignment with what he wants. And it's like I say with my kids, or used to have to say with my kids all the time, look, you're going to brush your teeth. You're just going to do this the easy way or the hard way. My prayer is that we would choose the easy way. Do hard things, but do it in the easy way, in obedience and our love for him. Hope this is helpful. Hope your growth groups are fire whenever you get to go do it. Don't neglect it. So important. Don't neglect it. Hope you guys have fun, and hopefully these videos are formative and informative and helpful for your discussion. Love you guys, and we will see you soon.